The blood on the ivory silk wasn't the worst part. It was the velvet box sitting on the altar, delivered by the very men sworn to kill him. Inside lay a severed diamond ring and a message that would burn the Chicago underworld to the ground. She was gone. The morning of October 14th was supposed to mark the union of two entirely different worlds. High above the bustling streets of Chicago, inside the sprawling penthouse suite of the peninsula, the air was thick with the scent of white roses and expensive champagne. Sienna Caldwell, an art appraiser with a pristine background and a smile that could disarm a loaded weapon, stood before a gilded mirror. She was draped in a custom Oscar de la Renta gown, a vision of absolute perfection. In less than 3 hours, she was scheduled to walk down the aisle at Holy Name Cathedral to marry Dominic Costa. Dominic was not a man who lived in the light. As the undisputed head of the Costa crime family, a syndicate that controlled everything from the shipping ports of Lake Michigan to the underground casinos in the West Loop, his life was a masterclass in violence and control. Yet Sienna had been his one vulnerability, the single soft edge in a world made of razor wire. Their romance had been a whirlwind, starting at a charity gala at the Field Museum, where he had outbid everyone for a Renaissance painting just to win 10 minutes of her time. Now, he was giving her his name, a move that his underbosses whispered made him dangerously weak. Outside the heavy mahogany doors of the bridal suite, Dominic's personal security detail stood like stone gargoyles. Vincent Bianchi, a 6'4" enforcer who had been with the Costa family for 2 decades, anchored the hallway. Nobody went in. Nobody came out. Security was impenetrable. The entire floor had been swept for bugs, the windows were bulletproof, and the elevators required a specialized keycard controlled by Dominic's men. Inside the room, Sienna's maid of honor and lifelong best friend, Chloe Carmichael, was adjusting the intricate lace of Sienna's veil. "You look like royalty, Sienna," Chloe murmured, her hands trembling slightly. Even after a year, Chloe was terrified of Dominic's world. "Are you absolutely sure about this? Once you put that ring on, there is no walking away. You become a Costa." Sienna met Chloe's gaze in the mirror, her green eyes unreadable for a fleeting second before softening into a warm smile. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Chloe. Dominic he's different with me. I'm ready." Chloe nodded, though the anxiety didn't completely leave her face. "I'm going to run down to the concierge. We forgot the matching clutch for the reception, and my feet are already killing me in these heels. I'll be back in 5 minutes." "Take your time," Sienna replied, turning to look out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling Chicago skyline. The gray clouds rolling in off the lake promised rain, an omen she chose to ignore. Chloe opened the heavy suite door, offering a tight, polite smile to Vincent Bianchi in the hallway. Vincent barely acknowledged her, his cold eyes scanning the empty corridor. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, the electronic lock engaging with a solid thud. Sienna was entirely alone. Across the city, in a private, cigar-smoke-filled room at a discreet club on Rush Street, Dominic Costa was pouring a glass of Macallan 25. He was dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, his usually tense shoulders relaxed for the first time in months. His consigliere, Tommy DeLuca, sat across from him, tapping a silver lighter against the mahogany table. "The cathedral is secure, Dom," Tommy reported, his gravelly voice low. "We have men at every entrance, snipers on the adjacent rooftops, and the local precinct captain has been heavily compensated to ensure squad cars detour traffic away from State Street. It's airtight." "It needs to be, Tommy," Dominic replied, swallowing the scotch. Roman Petrov has been too quiet since we took the South Side docks. I don't like it. He's a rattlesnake. He doesn't strike without coiling first. Petrov is bleeding money. He doesn't have the manpower to hit a wedding with 500 guests, half of whom are armed, Tommy reassured him. Today is about you and the girl. Let the war wait until tomorrow. Dominic checked his Rolex. 1:15 p.m. Let's head out. At exactly 1:20 p.m., Chloe Carmichael stepped off the private elevator back on the penthouse floor of the Peninsula, the silk clutch in her hand. She walked past Vincent, who remained rooted to his post, and swiped her keycard. The light blinked green. She pushed the door open. "Sienna, I got it, but I swear the concierge looked at me like I was insane for asking." Chloe's voice died in her throat. The suite was dead silent. The champagne glass Sienna had been drinking from sat on the vanity, a faint smudge of pale pink lipstick on the rim. But the room was empty. "Sienna!" Chloe called out, her voice pitching up with sudden panic. She walked into the lavish marble bathroom. Empty. She checked the adjoining dressing room. Nothing. Chloe burst back into the hallway, her face completely drained of color. "Vincent, where is she? Did she leave?" Vincent's brow furrowed, his hand instinctively dropping to the concealed holster beneath his jacket. "No one has come through this door, Miss Carmichael. She's inside." "She's not! The room is empty!" Vincent shoved past her, his massive frame tearing through the suite. He cleared every corner, every closet, his heart pounding a violent rhythm against his ribs. The windows were still locked from the inside. The ventilation shafts were too small for a human. There were no secret doors, no adjoining rooms that hadn't been secured. Sienna Caldwell had completely vanished into thin air. At 1:30 p.m., Dominic Costa's encrypted phone rang. It was Vincent. When Dominic heard the words, the glass of scotch shattered in his grip, driving jagged shards of crystal into his palm. He didn't feel the pain. He only felt the terrifying, ice-cold realization that the war hadn't waited for tomorrow. It had already begun. Within 20 minutes, the Peninsula Chicago was a fortress under siege, but not by the police. Dominic Costa's men locked down the entire block. Guests were detained in the lobby by men in sharp suits with dead eyes, while Dominic tore through the penthouse suite like a hurricane. His bleeding hand had ruined his pristine white cuffs, but he refused medical attention. "Explain it to me again," Dominic hissed, his voice so quiet it was far more terrifying than a scream. He stood inches from Vincent Bianchi's face. Vincent, a man who had broken kneecaps without blinking, swallowed hard. "Boss, I swear on my mother's life," Vincent said, his voice trembling. Miss Carmichael left. The door closed. I stood at the threshold the entire time. No one went in. No one came out. The cameras in the hallway show nothing but me standing there. Tommy DeLuca was examining the locked windows. "No forced entry, Dom. The glass is intact. The electronic lock logs show only the maid of honor's keycard." Dominic paced the room, his mind working in frantic, violent calculations. A woman in a massive, heavy wedding gown doesn't just evaporate. Someone took her. But how? "Get the hotel blueprints," Dominic barked. "Now! I want every service elevator, every laundry chute, every goddamn air duct mapped out." Someone had an inside route. For 6 agonizing hours, the Costa Syndicate tore Chicago apart. Illicit safe houses were raided, rival gang lieutenants were dragged from their homes and beaten for information, and the streets bled with Dominic's wrath. But there was nothing. The Russian syndicate, led by Roman Petrov, was the obvious suspect, but Petrov's men were completely off the grid. They had gone to ground, a move that only confirmed Dominic's darkest fears. Night fell over Chicago, a torrential downpour washing the neon-lit streets. Dominic retreated to his heavily fortified estate in Lake Forest, a sprawling compound surrounded by iron gates and armed guards. He sat in his dark study, staring at the engagement photo of him and Sienna sitting on his desk. His chest physically ached, a hollow, burning void that he didn't know how to endure. At 11:45 p.m., the perimeter alarms at the estate's main gate blared. Dominic and Tommy rushed out to the pouring rain, weapons drawn. A beaten, terrified civilian, a courier from a local delivery service, was kneeling in the mud, crying hysterically, while 4 of Dominic's guards held assault rifles to his head. "I was just paid to drop it off," the courier sobbed, shivering violently in the rain. "A guy in a black SUV handed me $2,000 in cash. He said if I didn't bring this exact package to this gate, he would kill my family. Please!" On the wet asphalt in front of the courier sat a square, black velvet box. Dominic's blood ran cold. He recognized the velvet. It was the same material from the jeweler in Antwerp who had crafted Sienna's ring. He waved his men back and slowly approached the box, the rain matting his dark hair to his forehead. He picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy. Back inside the study, under the harsh light of a desk lamp, Dominic set the box down. Tommy stood by his side, his hand resting on his weapon. "Want the bomb squad to clear it, Dom?" "No," Dominic said. His hands were remarkably steady as he unclasped the silver latch. The lid popped open. Inside, resting on a bed of black satin, was a crumpled, blood-soaked piece of white lace. Dominic recognized the intricate floral pattern immediately. It was a piece of Sienna's veil. Sitting right on top of the ruined lace was a sleek silver USB drive. No ransom note, no demands. Dominic plugged the drive into his encrypted laptop. A single video file popped up on the screen, titled simply, "The Debt." He clicked play. The screen flickered to life, showing a bleak, concrete room illuminated by a single overhead light. In the center of the frame, tied to a metal chair, was Sienna. Her beautiful wedding gown was torn and stained with dirt and dark patches of blood. Her makeup was smeared, her lip split and bleeding. Dominic let out a guttural sound, his fingers digging so hard into the edge of his mahogany desk that the wood groaned. "I'll kill them," he whispered, a promise made to God and the devil alike. "I will skin them alive." Then a figure stepped into the frame. It was Roman Petrov. The Russian mob boss looked immaculate in a dark suit, a cruel, mocking smile playing on his lips. He walked behind Sienna, resting his hands heavily on her bare, trembling shoulders. "Good evening, Dominic." Petrov's thick accent crackled through the laptop speakers. "I apologize for ruining your special day, but a man must collect what is owed to him. You stole my ports, Costa. You disrupted my supply lines. You thought you were untouchable because you fell in love. But love, it makes men blind." Petrov leaned down, grabbing a handful of Sienna's hair and yanking her head back. She whimpered, squeezing her eyes shut. Dominic lunged toward the screen before catching himself, his chest heaving. "But this is not a ransom video, Dominic," Petrov continued, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "I do not want your money. I want your empire. And to take an empire, you must first break the emperor." Petrov released Sienna's hair and stepped to the side. "Tell him, my dear. Tell the great Dominic Costa why you are here. Give him his final message. Sienna slowly opened her eyes. She looked directly into the camera lens. The sheer terror that had been on her face moments ago seemed to subtly shift. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Dominic," Sienna's voice was hoarse, cracking with emotion. "I'm sorry, I really am. I tried to find a way out, but there wasn't one." "Tell him the rest," Petrov barked, stepping closer. Sienna swallowed hard, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. But when she spoke, her words were clear, steady, and completely devastating. "My father didn't die of a heart attack 2 years ago, Dominic. He was murdered. And he owed the Petrov Syndicate $5 million. I didn't meet you by accident at that museum. I was sent there." The silence in Dominic's study was deafening. Tommy stopped breathing. Dominic froze, his mind violently rejecting the words echoing from the speakers. On the screen, Sienna let out a broken sob. "I was their inside man, Dominic. I deactivated the electronic lock in the bridal suite with a master code Roman gave me. I opened the window to the adjoining maintenance shaft myself. I gave them your shipping schedules, your security details, everything. The debt is paid. But Dominic," she leaned forward, her green eyes piercing through the screen, burning into his soul. "I didn't know they were going to kill me after I gave them what they wanted." The screen instantly went black. The study descended into a suffocating, graveyard silence. The black screen of the laptop reflected the hollow, devastated expression on Dominic Costa's face. Rain lashed violently against the reinforced glass of the estate windows, a chaotic symphony that completely failed to drown out the ringing in his ears. Tommy DeLuca stood frozen near the mahogany bookshelf, his hand still resting on the cold steel of his holstered weapon. For the first time in his long, brutal life in the Chicago underworld, Tommy didn't know what to say. Dominic didn't scream. He didn't shatter another glass or overturn the heavy desk. Instead, he reached out with blood-stained, trembling fingers and pressed the space bar. The video started over. "Dom, don't do this to yourself," Tommy rasped, stepping forward. "She played us. She played you. We need to lock down the accounts, change the shipping routes, and prepare the men. If Petrov has our security details, he's coming for the warehouses tonight." Dominic ignored him. His dark, storm-grey eyes were locked onto the screen, tracking every pixel, every shadow, every micro-expression on Sienna Caldwell's bruised face. He watched Roman Petrov's cruel hands grip her shoulders. He listened to her shattered voice repeating the confession that was meant to break the Costa Syndicate in half. "My father didn't die of a heart attack 2 years ago, Dominic. He was murdered. And he owed the Petrov Syndicate $5 million. I didn't meet you by accident at that museum. I was sent there." Dominic paused the video right there. The image of Sienna, tears cutting through the grime on her cheeks, froze on the display. "She's lying," Dominic whispered. The words barely carried over the crackle of the fireplace, but they held the weight of absolute certainty. Tommy sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "Dom, I know it hurts. Believe me, I know. But denial is going to get us all killed. She looked right into the camera and told you she gave Petrov the master codes. She gave him the routes. It's over. We have to retaliate." "You aren't listening to me, Tommy!" Dominic suddenly roared, his voice cracking like a whip through the heavy air of the study. He slammed his uninjured hand onto the desk, leaning in close to the frozen image of his bride. "Listen to what she actually said. I didn't meet you by accident at that museum." "So what?" Tommy asked, bewildered. She admitted she was tracking you. "We didn't meet at the Field Museum," Dominic said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, razor-sharp whisper. The fog of heartbreak was evaporating, replaced by a cold, calculating predatory instinct. "The charity gala where I bought that Renaissance painting to get her attention. That was at the Art Institute of Chicago. The Field Museum is completely different. Sienna has a master's degree in art history. She appraises Renaissance canvas for a living. She would never, under any circumstances, confuse the Art Institute with a natural history museum. Never." Tommy frowned, stepping closer to the screen. "You think she purposely planted a mistake in her confession?" "She was reading a script," Dominic deduced, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the exact angle of her gaze. "Look at her eyes just before she speaks. She glances slightly to the left of the lens. Someone is holding a cue card. But she deliberately changed the location." "Why?" Dominic furiously typed on his keyboard, pulling up a secure satellite map of the greater Chicago area. She said Field Museum. The Field Museum sits on Museum Campus, right off Lakeshore Drive. But what else is associated with Field in this city? Or maybe it's not the museum itself. Maybe it's the name. "Field," Tommy muttered, his mind racing to keep up with his boss. "Marshall Field? The old department store. No, Petrov wouldn't hold her downtown. Too much noise, too many cameras," Dominic said, his fingers flying across the keys. "He needs a place off the grid, a place he controls. What about the old airfield? The abandoned Meigs Field property?" "No, that's a park now." Dominic played the video again, turning the volume all the way up. The sound of Sienna's voice echoed, but this time Dominic closed his eyes, tuning her out, listening only to the ambient noise in the background. Beneath the hum of the terrible fluorescent lighting, there was a faint, rhythmic vibration. Thump, thump, thump. It was heavy, metallic, and distant. "That's a drop forge," Dominic said, his eyes snapping open. "Industrial machinery, heavy steel stamping. Petrov owns a front company down by the Calumet River," Tommy said, the realization hitting him like a freight train. "Southworks. There's an old, decommissioned steel mill right next to an active stamping plant. The property is registered under a shell corporation called Greenfield Holdings. Green Field." Dominic's chest heaved. A terrifying, beautiful smile touched the corners of his mouth. "She didn't betray me. She got caught. She knew they were going to force her to make this video, and she used it to tell me exactly where she is. She left me a breadcrumb." The heavy mahogany doors of the study flew open. Vincent Bianchi stood in the doorway, drenched in rain, holding a tactical rifle. "Boss, we have 30 men armed and ready in the garage. Just give the word." Dominic unbuttoned his ruined tuxedo jacket, tossing it onto the leather sofa. He walked over to a biometric safe embedded in the wall and pressed his thumb to the scanner. The heavy steel door clicked open, revealing an arsenal of high-grade weaponry. He pulled out a customized Heckler and Koch MP5 and 2 extra magazines, sliding them seamlessly into a tactical rig. "Vincent, secure the perimeter of the estate," Dominic ordered, his voice radiating pure, lethal authority. "Tommy, you're with me. We are taking the 2 armored SUVs. No headlights once we cross south of 95th Street. We go in completely dark." "What's the play, Dom?" Tommy asked, racking the slide of his pistol. "We don't siege the building," Dominic said, sliding into a black Kevlar vest. "If we hit the front doors, Petrov will put a bullet in her head before we even cross the threshold. We infiltrate. Silent. Deadly. Any man wearing a Russian syndicate tattoo doesn't leave that property breathing. Am I clear? Crystal, Tommy said, a grim smile spreading across his face. Dominic paused, looking back at the laptop screen one last time. Sienna's tear-streaked face stared back at him. She was terrified, bruised, and alone in the dark. But she was brilliant. She had outsmarted a Russian mob boss with a single, deliberate lie, holding on to the absolute faith that the man she loved would decipher it. "Hold on, Sienna," Dominic whispered to the empty room. "I'm bringing the entire city down on their heads." He turned on his heel and marched out into the torrential storm, the undisputed king of the Chicago underworld, ready to burn his own kingdom to ashes for the woman he loved. The Calumet River ran black beneath the torrential downpour, swallowing the moonlight and reflecting only the harsh, amber glare of the industrial floodlights on the far bank. The abandoned Greenfield Holdings steel mill loomed like a rotting iron cathedral against the night sky. Thick, rusted pipes snaked along the exterior, and the rhythmic, deafening thump of the active drop forge next door perfectly masked the sound of the two matte black SUVs rolling to a silent halt in the muddy weeds. Dominic Costa stepped out into the rain, his MP5 tight against his chest. He was a ghost in the storm. Beside him, Tommy DeLuca and 8 of the Costa family's most lethal enforcers fanned out, their movements synchronized and completely silent. They communicated in sharp, tactical hand signals. There was no room for error. The cost of a mistake was sitting tied to a chair inside. 2 Petrov guards, smoking under a corrugated metal awning near the loading docks, never heard the footfalls in the mud. Dominic raised a suppressed pistol, firing twice in a heartbeat. Both men dropped instantly, their cigarettes fizzling out in the puddles. Tommy signaled toward a rusted maintenance ladder leading to the catwalks above the main warehouse floor. They scaled the slick iron rungs, peering through the shattered skylights into the cavernous space below. The warehouse was a graveyard of rusted machinery and empty shipping containers. In the absolute center of the floor, illuminated by a bank of portable halogen work lights, sat Sienna. She was still tied to the metal chair. Surrounding her were 12 heavily armed Russian mercenaries. Standing directly in front of her, pacing like a restless tiger, was Roman Petrov. "Check the transfers again," Petrov barked at a technician sitting at a makeshift computer terminal on an oil drum. "Costa's accounts should be bleeding out by now. The codes she gave us were verified." The technician frantically typed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the damp chill. "Boss, the system accepted her master key, but the routing protocols are blocked. The money isn't moving into our offshore accounts." "What do you mean it isn't moving?" Petrov snarled, drawing a silver Desert Eagle and pressing the barrel hard against Sienna's temple. She gasped, squeezing her eyes shut, but didn't beg. Up on the catwalk, Dominic's heart stopped. His finger hovered over the trigger of his MP5. If he missed by a fraction of an inch, or if Petrov flinched, Sienna would die. He needed a distraction. "The codes she gave us," the technician stammered, pale with absolute panic. "They weren't for Costa's accounts. She used the terminal access to mirror our own internal network. Boss, she didn't drain his money. She bypassed our firewalls. She's currently draining ours." Petrov froze, slowly turning his head to look at the woman in the ruined wedding dress. Sienna opened her eyes, a bruised, bloody, but entirely victorious smile pulling at her lips. "I told you, Roman. My father owed you $5 million. I just took $50 million from your Cayman accounts and donated it to 12 different federal charities. The debt is paid." A roar of unhinged fury ripped from Petrov. He raised his weapon, preparing to execute her on the spot. The skylight shattered into a million glittering pieces. Dominic dropped from the shadows like a fallen angel, crashing onto a metal shipping container directly behind Petrov. Before the Russians could even raise their rifles, the darkness erupted in suppressed gunfire. Tommy and the Costa enforcers rained a merciless hail of lead from the catwalks. Petrov's mercenaries were torn to shreds before they could identify where the shots were coming from, their bodies hitting the concrete in a chaotic chorus. Petrov spun wildly, firing his Desert Eagle. A bullet tore through the steel inches from Dominic's head. Dominic vaulted off the container, slid across the wet concrete, and unleashed a burst from his MP5. 3 rounds caught Petrov in the chest. The Russian mobster collapsed, choking on his own blood as his eyes went wide with shock. The warehouse fell into a sudden, deafening silence. Dominic sprinted to the center of the room, falling to his knees. He pulled a combat knife to sever the thick zip ties binding Sienna's wrists and ankles. The moment she was free, she collapsed forward into his chest. "I've got you," Dominic choked out, his massive hands wrapping securely around her trembling frame. "You're safe. I'm here." Sienna sobbed into his Kevlar vest. "You understood. The museum. You understood." "I heard you," he whispered fiercely, kissing her bruised forehead. "But what the hell did you do to his accounts?" She wiped the blood from her face, her brilliant green eyes meeting his. "He forced me to log into a secure terminal to prove I had your access codes. But as an art appraiser, I spent years tracking illicit offshore money laundering rings to authenticate stolen paintings. I reversed the worm. I wiped him out." Dominic stared at her, breathless. He had thought he was marrying an innocent woman. Instead, he realized he had found a queen perfectly capable of ruling the darkness alongside him. He reached into his tactical trousers and pulled out a different black velvet box. He flipped it open, revealing a flawless, emerald-cut diamond ring. "We missed our reservation at the cathedral," Dominic said softly, sliding the ring onto her blood-stained finger. "But Tommy is an ordained minister, and I am not waiting another second to make you my wife." Sienna laughed, a beautiful, broken sound echoing through the steel mill. She pulled him down by his vest, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of rain, blood, and absolute victory. "If you found yourself holding your breath through this descent into the dark, twisted and thrilling world of the Chicago Mafia, you are not alone. The line between love and survival is razor thin, and Dominic and Sienna proved that true loyalty is forged in the shadows. Do you want more pulse-pounding stories of romance, betrayal, and underworld justice? Hit that like button, share this video with your fellow thriller addicts, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a twist.